Today we're going to review how to use the classroom continuum. The continuum is used when a student is having an unexpected behavior. So we have our classroom expectations set. These are set district-wide, and all the classroom expectations are the same for each teacher. So that makes it very simple to teach and reteach your classroom expectations. For today, we're going to start with a common concern for the continuum. I often hear teachers say, the continuum doesn't work. It doesn't work. I've used it, it doesn't work. Please try not to get hung up on that the continuum doesn't work, because I can assure you it may not work the first time, it may not work the second time, but what you're doing with the continuum is being consistent in order to shape a behavior over time. Okay, so you have to be patient with wanting a student to fix their behavior quickly, because these are not the students who do that. Okay, so let's move past that thought process and understand that you are trying to shape behavior over time. All right, let's start with a classroom expectation, a common one that students struggle with, especially young students. Let's say we're going back to our classroom expectation and you need a student to follow your directions. All right, let's say the directions are to come sit at the carpet. All right, and you have a student who is refusing to move to the carpet. All right, for being a learner, you're going to follow directions the first time. Okay, the direction is come to the carpet. When using the continuum, always go back to your classroom expectations. Use the same language. Student does not come. Let's say the student stays seated in a chair. You're going to start with step one, which is privately remind the student of your expectation. Do not make up a bunch of words to use with the student. There's no reason to do that. Just keep it very, very simple. Go straight back to the language that's right here that you worked on teaching the whole class. And you're going to go over to the student and say, student, please remember we're going to follow directions the first time. Please come to the carpet. And you're just using a nice, kind voice to privately remind the student. If you don't try with your tone and your body language and your voice, it might make it more difficult for you and the kiddo. All right, so that is step one, a private reminder or redirect. Let's say the student doesn't move. So now we're looking at part two of the expectation, or of the continuum, which is reteaching. All right, so in this case, you might need to reteach this expectation to the whole class if you have more than one student not following your directions. Or, let's say it's just one student not moving, you're going to need to find time to reteach that student. So, if you don't want to make the student, like, this is how we go to the carpet, remember we stand up, walk, find your square, then you might want to send the whole class back and try practicing if you think that might help that student be more successful, but you do not have to do that. You may reteach that student individually. Here's what I would recommend. Don't reteach that student while everyone else is at the carpet and that student's sitting over in their chair. This might be a time to move on to offering a choice. So you may walk back over to the student. Hey, I'm expecting you to come to the carpet. Would you like to be seated at the carpet, or do you want to stay in your chair? And guess what? You have given the choice to the student to stay in their chair. I know that seems weird. I don't want to give students if they refuse, then I'm just giving them what they want. Okay, I get it. But now it is your idea. Okay, so we're just kind of changing our thinking. It is now your idea for that student to stay in the chair, and you're giving them the option to select stay in the chair while you continue teaching, or they can move to the carpet. And then I would walk away. Get away from that student, let them make the choice. Sometimes it's just a power struggle, all right? Now, let's say the student stays in their chair. Well, that's fantastic because that's one of the choices that you are offering, and you can move on with your lesson. And my guess is that student is going to eventually get up and walk to the carpet, and if that's the case, choose your battles. Don't address that, ignore, and keep teaching. All right, I'm kind of thinking kindergarten, first grade, a little younger for this example. Let's say you have a student who is really struggling with raise a quiet hand. And if you've listened to me present before, you know that I say everyone raises a quiet hand, everyone. District-wide expectation for being respectful in the classroom, you raise a quiet hand. You will never regret asking and expecting your students to raise their hand. You can always give permission for students to not raise their hand. Here's the example. Boys and girls, when we're at the carpet and I'm reading a story out loud, sometimes I will ask you some questions. When I ask you these questions, you don't have to raise your hand this time. You can just say the answer together like a choral response. Or when we're seated together at small group, you do not have to raise your hand. So you may give permission for students to not raise their hand, but always start the year out in every classroom, specials, title, your full classrooms, asking students to raise their hand so that they get used to that being the expectation. But there's always a couple of kiddos who really struggle with raising a quiet hand, all right? You're gonna work your way through the continuum, okay? Once you do the reminder of your expectation, then reteach. Reteach can be separate. If you know, I'm getting to know this kid, he or she really struggles with raising a quiet hand, I'm gonna take some time while everyone's working and I'm gonna say, hey, I really wanna see you practice raising your quiet hand. It just looks like this, okay? You need me, you need to say something, you're just gonna raise your hand, okay? I'm gonna look at you and I'm gonna remind you with my eyes, raise a quiet hand. And that might be your reteaching, all right? Your reteaching might just be that it's not that particular setting when it happened, but you're proactively talking with the student ahead of time. Offering choice doesn't always work with raise a quiet hand because the only other option to get your attention is to raise your hand. So you're just going to ignore when a student is blurting out, okay? I say ignore. You can remind them, but if they're blurting out, please don't answer them. Please don't answer their question because then the blurting out worked, and we don't want that. That's not how we access your attention. Okay, so then maybe the student needs to be removed to an alternate seat where they're not accessing the attention of those around them. And moving to an alternate seat can be very positive. I can see you're having trouble focusing here. You keep talking out. How about if you come sit over here in this space where I think you might be more successful, right? It doesn't have to be punitive or you don't have to be angry to see a student in an alternate area. You're just removing the attention from those around them, all right? Lastly, you can use that yellow pass for the student to exit your room and go get a more specific, maybe a little more firm reminder from your recovery room staff to really go over what expectation is the student having trouble with. Remember to select if it's be respectful, responsible, safe, or a learner, because your recovery room staff is going to go straight to that column and the language will sound like, oh, looks like you're having trouble being responsible. Were you having trouble with any of the following? And they can triage and discuss with that student using the same set of classroom expectations. When the student comes back to your classroom from the yellow pass, please welcome them, greet them coming back in with a fresh slate. And then if you need to work your way through the continuum again, because the student is struggling to meet these expectations, then you start over. 3 yellow passes stays in the recovery room with an office referral. If you are taking the time to really consistently use the continuum, not shoot straight to the yellow pass, okay? That does not work. That's not being consistent with your response of starting with redirect, reteach, okay? To shape behavior, kids need your consistent response. If you consistently shoot straight to the yellow pass, you will get students trying to leave your room on purpose, possibly. You will get students who are unsure of the exact expectation they should work on. Okay, it's very confusing for kids. So you really need to stick with the flow of this continuum. And you may not get to the yellow pass, and that's good. Lastly, we are not lowering or changing our expectations. Okay, so you are going to have students struggle to meet these expectations. Okay, students will struggle with that. We keep the same expectations. Okay, we keep our expectations up here, but we might be giving more support to students to get to our classroom expectations. Part of that support is using the continuum. I hope this clears up any lingering questions or any confusion about using the continuum. And remember, it doesn't always work the first, second, or third time, but consistent use of the continuum will help shape behavior over time. Thanks for watching.